right, welcome back, everybody. We're following breaking news in Rochester. Let's listen into a live press conference right now.
We have seen righteous anger and heartfelt protest from many residents of our community. I know the vast majority of the people that have taken to our streets do so with pure hearts, good intentions to ensure tragedies like the death of Mr. Prude never happen again. Their message that we must do better and that we have to address how we police our city has been heard. These calls are not new, and the chief and I have worked diligently to do the necessary work. It is my solemn duty as the mayor of this city to honor Mr. Prude, to not let his death be in vain, and to do everything possible to transform how we police our city to truly protect and serve our residents. That is why today, as a child who was raised on Jefferson Avenue and educated at Wilson Magnet High School, and as a mother who raises my daughter in our city, I am recommitting myself to doing that work. And we have already begun. We are doubling the availability of mental health professionals. At the suggestion of Council Vice President Lightfoot, we will take our Family Crisis Intervention Team, or FACIT, out of the police department and move it and its funding to the Department of Youth and Recreation Services, where our Pathways to Peace program already resides, to better and more humanely serve our residents. We will fully engage with the Race Commission and our Real Rapid Response Team to further improve our response to mental health crises and re-envision our police department. However, this work won't be done in a week or in a weekend. Today, and to do this right, we will need to continue to deliver consistent progress over the coming weeks, months, and years. But I am committed to addressing these challenges and ensuring that change truly comes. But we need to also address the immediate issues in front of us. I am glad that the Attorney General informed us yesterday that she will impanel a grand jury to complete the investigation of Mr. Prude's death. And I have to also address the response to the protest by our police department. I have spoken with Chief Singletary, and we have discussed at length how our police department has responded to the protesters. The deployment of pepper balls, tear gas, the fireworks, and agitators have escalated these situations. That is the reason why I'm asking you, the citizens of Rochester, to help us. In the city of Rochester, we take care of our own. I am proud to stand here with Reverend Myra Brown, pastor of Spiritus Christi Church. Today, she and I met and have worked together to come up with a plan that will allow our protesters to exercise their First Amendment right to assemble free from distress while our officers protect the public safety building. Pastor Brown and I are calling on the elders of this city and our community to meet at her church located at 121 North Fitzhugh Street at 6:30 p.m. today. RTS has agreed to bus in our elders. They will stand as the buffer between our protesters and our police department. I appreciate her and others for their willingness to step up and help us through these trying times. No one of us can do anything alone. It takes people reaching across, working together to ensure that we have a brighter future. You will hear from Reverend Brown in a moment, but I also need this community to understand the importance of the public safety building. Not only does our police department reside within the PSB, but our fire department's leadership and the nucleus of our city's operations reside in that building. Our ability to serve the residents of our city on a daily basis depends on the services that are held within that building. We have to protect it. There is credible information that outside agitators want to destroy the PSB. That said, what truly matters is creating a city that is dedicated to serving, protecting, and lifting up the least among us. What will always pain me about the death of Mr. Daniel Prude is our failure to do that. We had a human being in need of help, in need of compassion. In that moment, we had an opportunity to protect him, to keep him warm, to bring him to safety, to begin the process of healing him and lifting him up. We have to own the fact that in that moment, we did not do that. Unfortunately, we will not have the opportunity to save Mr. Prude. I can't bring him back. None of us can. But what I do have the opportunity to ensure is that his memory creates everlasting change, to ensure that he did not die in vain, that the next man or woman that needs our help gets the very best that this community has to offer. So let me say this to this community. I wholeheartedly believe that Chief Laron Singletary is the right person to lead us through these difficult times. He was born and raised in this city, educated in this city, worked his way up to lead the department he loves. I do not believe there's another person more dedicated to changing the culture of policing than Laron. I know that he and I are committed to being better, working harder to restore the trust and faith of our community. Please welcome our police chief.
First and foremost, I extend my condolences to the Prude family, and we want to make sure that Mr. Prude's death changes how we do policing in this city. Moving forward, we are dedicated to taking the necessary actions to prevent this from ever happening again. And I understand that there are certain calls that law enforcement shouldn't handle alone, and we are looking at ways to reimagine policing surrounding mental health, and have been for the last several months. And as the mayor stated, we have already started working with City Council to remove the Family and Crisis Intervention Team, is known as FACET, from the RPD, and all of its resources to DRISE, and we are prepared to do more. RPD is working with our county's forensic intervention team and clinicians out of the Office of Mental Health to effectively assist residents with mental health needs who have repeated contact with law enforcement, with the goal to connect said individuals to outpatient services and to decrease the use of emergency and crisis responses. And police reform is actively moving forward with the Race Commission, charged with developing policies and procedures and legislation that will address racial inequities, as well as the things that we've already instituted, such as body-worn cameras and the implementation of the Community Affairs Bureau that I did in 2018. And as I share the mayor's sentiment, there is more work to be done, and I'm dedicated to doing what I was charged to do, which is to serve our citizens so that together we can collectively create change in our community. And tonight, I'm dedicated to work with community leaders such as Reverend Myra Brown, someone who I've been accustomed to know throughout in this community, and our city elders, to ensure that tonight we protect people's First Amendment rights to protest peacefully. Thank you. Now that I welcome Reverend Myra Brown.
Hi, I'm Reverend Myra Brown, and I'm the pastor of Spiritus Christi Church in Rochester. On last night, protesters were trapped in front of my church, and we took them in. The church was smattered.
Everybody, we are listening to a live update here from Rochester. We're right now listening to a reverend who has a church near the public safety building. We just heard from Police Chief Laron Singletary. We also heard from the mayor there, Lovely Warren. She committed to re-envisioning the police department there. Also said they're going to make some changes. They want to add more to their mental health crisis team. She also said they want to divert some funding from police to youth services. And in an interesting note, she's asking elders of the community tonight to become a buffer between protesters and police officers at that public safety building to make sure everybody stays safe and tensions aren't escalated. I want to bring in some guests that I have right now: Brittany Packnett-Cunningham, Paul Butler, and Mark Claxton. And Mark, I want to begin with you and hear your reaction to some of these changes that we're hearing from the mayor. Are these unique right now in today's time?
I think the mayor's statements, as well as Chief Singletary's statements, indicate a willingness, a apparent willingness in Rochester to really buy into much of what is considered to be reform in the nation right now. We're talking about reinvesting, redistributing, or reallocating resources to different areas that police have normally, under the old rules, have grown accustomed to enforcing, such as dealing with individuals with psychological disabilities or mental illness, and redistributing that responsibility to the professionals in those specific areas. That's important. And it's all consistent with much of what's encompassed in the Justice and Policing Act. I think it is also significant that both the mayor and the police commissioner acknowledged the lapses that occurred there. I wish, however, that the mayor was assertive in
It looks like we might have lost Mark. We'll try and get him back. But Brittany Packnett-Cunningham, I want to pick up with what he was saying. We heard the mayor say we had an opportunity to protect Daniel Prude, keep him warm, lift him up. In that moment, we did not do that. And she said, I can't bring him back, but I can promise everlasting change. But she also, in the same vein, through her support behind the current police chief. We know that this happened in March. She didn't find out about it until August. The police chief said that his department was investigating. Right now, is what you're seeing enough of an action?
Well, I certainly think that there are some important steps being taken, but according to activists and community members on the ground in Rochester, there's a great deal more that needs to happen. Look, when we talk about investing in communities and in the social services that we need, this is precisely what Joe Prude, Daniel's brother, was trying to see happen. He did everything that we were told to do in a moment of crisis. He called 911. Imagine if a social worker had picked up that phone. That's exactly what needs to happen when we invest in communities and social services, because 30 to 50% of the people who are killed by police every year across the country have a physical or mental disability. So this kind of investment is critically important. However, what is also true is that only so much change occurs if simultaneously we are not also shrinking the amount of encounters that people have with police. Yes, it is important to have more social workers, better social services, more expansive social services. But if you are not actually seeing the power and the engagement of that police department shrinking and decreasing alongside it, you're only going to ever see so much change. That's what the research is telling us. And frankly, if we look at the behavior of the Rochester Police Department for the last few nights of largely peaceful protests without incident, the fact that they were tear gassing peaceful protesters, that they were launching pepper balls on peaceful protesters, just as was done to us in Ferguson, that kind of behavior does not lead me to believe that investments alone in social services are going to make the difference here. If you look at the words of activists and organizers on the ground from Rochester in the last few nights, they have already used the strategy of asking elders who, let's be clear, are at greater risk of coronavirus to be that buffer and that barrier.
What I thought.
And it hasn't seemed to make a difference. Across the country, we've seen that age is not a barrier for police violence, unfortunately. And I think that the real thing here that needs to happen is that mayor needs to be very clear with the police chief that this kind of response and these kinds of encounters are completely unacceptable.
Important points there. And Paul Butler, let's go to you now. We know that the Attorney General of New York has announced that she's going to set up a grand jury panel to look at any potential charges, if there should be any, in the death of Daniel Prude. From what you've seen in the video and the reporting, what's your take on that?
The mayor claimed that Rochester takes care of its own, that claim rings hollow. The Rochester police did not take care of Daniel Prude. Rather, according to the medical examiner, the police killed Mr. Prude. The official cause of death was homicide by asphyxiation. They did that not only by using that medieval spit hood on him, but also restraining him like the cops did George Floyd by the head, the leg, and the back. Incredibly, the official police version was that Mr. Prude died of a drug overdose. And reportedly, the police chief told that lie to the mayor. But police reform is about transparency and accountability. The Rochester Police Department has been the opposite of that. I was expecting the police chief to resign. You know, Lindsay, reform here was accomplished by Black Lives Matter activists taking it to the street. So now they're going to be mental health services, first responders who know how to treat people who are in medical crisis. So that's an important first step. And now there's also an investigation by the Attorney General's office. If there's criminal culpability, as I think there is, then these officers must be brought to justice.
Paul Butler, Brittany Packnett-Cunningham, Mark Claxton, thank you all so much for joining us today. Stay tuned. More news after the break.